Hey everyone, I'm Ian Stenhouse. I'm joined again this week with Dennis Styak. We're going to play some more Blood Omen Legacy of Kain.
Hey everyone, and we also have Callie joining us as well, as you can see.
Yep. We are also joined with a special guest today, Ben Lincoln, creator of the website Legacy of Kain, The Lost Worlds. The Legacy of Kain, The Lost Worlds is a website dedicated to finding deleted and alternative content, to the Legacy of Kain franchise. So we are joined with Ben.
Welcome, Ben.
Hi, Dennis. Hi, Ian.
Hey, welcome to the stream.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, I'm going to load into the game.
And this time, everyone, we have the PC version, which is frame locked at the proper frame rate. Ian is playing with a controller and has practiced, and we're in much better shape than last time, so there should be less dying.
Yes, those who joined us last week were much like me, frustrated with my constant dying. So I do have a new save, and I do have a better start to this area that I was dying a lot.
It's also less merciless now with the frame rate being the way the game was originally designed. So, all right.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay, now that we're rolling and playing some Legacy of Kain, Ben, do you want to start the honors and get things rolling?
I'd be happy to. So, Deadhouse Sonata is being marketed as a spiritual successor to Legacy of Kain, and I've been forwarded a comment, kind of on behalf of the community. There's concern from some folks. Legacy of Kain is a very story-heavy series with a lot of character development. How are you going to do that kind of narrative-driven story development in an online game?
Right. I think that's a good question, and I think this question really goes to the core of what Apocalypse is all about. And in order to answer this question, I want to tell a few stories to give context to everything, and just so people understand what's happening in the video game world today and why we think the approach we're taking is absolutely not only the best for Deadhouse Sonata, but also the best for narrative in video games. And so to answer that, let me start with when we first founded Apocalypse, we wanted to do free-to-play online multiplayer games because we think the model is the most superior for both gamers and for both developers. And what do I mean by that? Well, in the end, with free-to-play, there's very many ways to sell games. Premium, where you get everything with one shot, or free-to-play, where you can try before you buy, and then if you like the game and you put in a lot of time, you can then decide to spend some money on it. I think that, by and large, is the best model, but not everyone agrees with that, and that's a personal preference. But here's what's happening in the video games industry. I'll tell a little story. Since we started Apocalypse, many people, many developers and even publishers that we talk to would say, we're not doing free-to-play. Last year, around the summertime, the metrics started getting released that 86% of all global video game revenue was based off of free-to-play. That means all the other games, all the Calls of Duty, all the single-player games, all the games that people who probably like from the Legacy of Kain community that are story-based fit within that 14%. When we started looking at the metrics, we looked at that last year and we said, wow, this looks like it's going to go even further to free-to-play. It looks like pretty soon almost everything is going to be free-to-play, online, and there's not going to be any alternatives. Well, this year, in January, the stats came out for 2019, and now free-to-play games and free-to-play online games now account for 90% of all global revenue. So what does that mean? That means the medium of video games itself has completely changed. And I would expect probably by 2 to 3 years from now, it's going to be at 99%. And there are many reasons why all this is happening, and I can go into the details of why that's happening. But more to the point, if we don't figure out a way to tell stories in this medium, then there's a real strong chance that the medium itself and the whole idea of telling stories in video games is going to go away. And this is very, very similar to when we first started making Legacy of Kain. When we started making Legacy of Kain, we never did a narrative game before. We did strategic, hybrid strategy games before. Dark Legion, Cyber Empires, very similar to some of the games, some of the Total War series is the only way to describe it. Except this was several years before, or a decade before they started making those. And we were also a Western developer that was making a role-playing game on a console when those only came out from Japan. So people are like, you can't do role-playing on a console that is only done in Japan. They're dominated by Japan, so you can't do that. And we also did an anti-hero game, which at the time was completely unheard of as well, where you play a vampire that was very dark. It was the sort of opposite of what was the trend, where pretty much every storyline was based off of Zelda, or at least similar to where you have to save the princess. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but so the problems that we face now and the concerns that people are seeing in the Legacy of Kain community is, how is Dennis going to do this, or how is Apocalypse going to do this, and how can we possibly bring narrative together in this space, are the problems that we need to tackle, and is what I'm excited about, because I do think we have really good approaches to some of this stuff. We're going to ask everyone's feedback, but in the end, rest assured, our goal is to make it just as deep, if not deeper, than what you saw with Legacy of Kain with story. But as you can see, as we rolled out with the Ages, we also have a chance to create a living, breathing world that can adapt with the community, and so people can leave their mark on the franchise as well. So anyway, that's the answer to that. Will it be narrative driven? The answer is absolutely. That's why we're doing it. And I know through a lot of discussions with peers in the industry, a lot of people think that narrative and online free-to-play is an oxymoron. We're on a crusade to say story in video games is important, and we're going to pave the way, hopefully, on how to do story in video games well in this new medium, which is the online free-to-play space, which is soon going to be probably the only model left in the next 2 to 5 years. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Just gonna save. Died a couple times.
It's all right. You had some Hearts of Darkness. You're doing well.
Well, I've been told to save those for the. I already forget the name, but apparently there's a part that comes up that's pretty. Also, I got these. Blanking on the name of them, but I found these in a graveyard or something.
Flays?
No, the flays, but I also have the. Sorry, classic. Third Death of the Night.
All right, we're just starting. We're doing well.
Yeah. Oh man, come on.
All right. We have another question ready, or?
Well, something I've been super curious about is you've talked a lot about Blood Omen's influence on Dead House Sonata. Could you talk a little bit about influences from your other games on the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So influences from other games I've worked on into Dead House Sonata besides Blood Omen? Just to make sure I understand.
Yeah, I'm especially curious about Eternal Darkness and Two Human, but you have such a long career in the industry.
Sure.
I'd be curious, things like aspects of Dead House Sonata that might not be there if you hadn't tried something on a previous game or.
Right. Well, I think okay. So let's start off with Eternal Darkness. Eternal Darkness was, we had just inklings of some Lovecraftian material with the Dark Entity in Legacy of Kain, but when we explored Eternal Darkness, we did a deep dive into Lovecraft. And now you're going to find that there is a huge, I would say, influence of Lovecraft in Dead House Sonata. So we're going to have, in some sense, many elder gods that are heavily influenced by some of the things we did in Eternal Darkness. We're going to have an entire house that delves into sanity, and they're going to have. So one of the things we talk about with Dead House Sonata is we have a trinary archetype system for Dead House. Each house is going to have its own system, and it's going to have its own trinary set. And just imagine one that's based off of Sanity and House of the Mind, and you're going to start seeing that. And if you look on our website under lore, we sort of preview where we're going with some of these other houses and wars with other houses, quite frankly, in Seven Sons of Twilight, in sort of the first story that you can see in the Necro Libriatus. And so that's one aspect. So we're definitely going to dive into sanity effects, how the undead even work with that, because those who know a lot about the undead, sanity has a very different effect on the undead, and in many cases are immune to many sanity effects. Another game that has some influence on us is, quite frankly, Fantasy Empires and Dark Legions, which had also an effect on Blood Omen. I don't think there was much of this in the follow-up games beyond Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, but in Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, we had an entire battle, an entire war that Kain went through when he was, fighting the Nemesis. And there was entire war simulators. And one of the things that we have planned for Dead House Sonata is to be involved in very large campaigns and skirmishes and wars. And you can't see it right now because we're so early. But one of the things that's going to happen with the enemies, very cool, look at you, is that we're going to have very intelligent enemies that work in groups. So there'll be leaders, support, frontline enemies that you'll have to deal with that will work in groups. And we actually had some of that in Legacy of Kain, and we're going to go back to that for this. So there's going to be some very interesting things that we do when it comes to some of the combat, where you're going to have to analyze the enemy, see how the battalions or groups of enemies are put together. And we did have some of that into Human, and we'll be bringing that back. And as we've already previewed a little bit, some of the sliding mechanics and some of the fast combat, it's not going to be quite as hectic as we had into Human, that was much closer to Devil May Cry, but we are going to take some of that and throw it into Dead House Sonata as well. So you're really seeing almost every game I do really is taking all the knowledge that I've accumulated over the years and trying to take the best of all the worlds that I know. And this also, Ben, I'll throw one more thing in there, and I hope this answer isn't too long, but this also goes for literature as well. Since starting Apocalypse, I've been able to read some fantastic series. I've really gotten into Thomas Ligotti, who I think is one of the best, psychological or horror writers out there. Many would, I think he's fantastic. His writing blows me away. And also Stephen Erickson from Malazan Book of the Fallen, and really weaving an incredibly detailed universe. I'm in awe in what he's put together. And I got really frustrated with the Game of Thrones books when they started getting really slow. So I picked up Stephen Erickson because he had promised to come out with a 10-book series called Malazan Book of the Fallen. He'd do it every year, and he actually hit all of his goals. And some of his stuff was just amazing. The world building was some of the best I've ever seen. So those are sort of the things that you can look forward to in Dead House Sonata, as far as influences and homages and things like that.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, you touched on something I was noticing in some of the more recent videos with the sort of too human look to the combat, but with a very Kain-like character, and I'm very interested in seeing more of that.
There's more of that coming, and we're starting right now, just so everyone's aware. All of the animations, the character model that you're seeing, it's all being redone. So, and some of the animations for the vampire right now were done by Jim, who's a programmer. So we know it's not polished. This is what being transparent is all about. You're going to see a bit of ugliness when the sausage is being made, but we hope that by getting feedback from the community, it will be worth it. Look at you, you're all into the secrets now. Now you're getting it. That's great. So But we are going to develop the 2 human, a lot of some of the combat stuff that was quite popular, but we want people to keep in mind that the vampire is going to be the fastest class. So once we start introducing the Lich, it's going to be a much more strategic sort of fire attack from a distance class, and the Revenant is going to be an in-your-face tank-ish kind of character class, where it's going to be combat will be much slower and much more brutal.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying the last tavern I was in had like a secret thing where you hit something and the back opened up, so I'm just being cautious.
You gotta possess people. A lot of the things that we did in Blood Omen, I'm surprised that a lot of games really don't do that often. And so possession and all those kind of fun things that you see in the towns here, we're really going to bring that back in Dead House, because it's just so much fun to walk around the town and possess people and go into bars and look for secrets and have different. We did a video on that, like timing on different weather effects, and man, some of the stuff that Yuri's doing like simulating planets orbiting and full moon cycles. It's really cool. I can't wait till we get a chance to show some of that stuff off.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. Okay.
Dennis, you mentioned a little while ago the Necrolibriatus. For folks who haven't been keeping up to date on the promotional material, can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, the Necrolibriatus is essentially the Bible of the Undead, and it's a 3D book that you can see on our website under Dead House Sonata Lore, and it has some previews of where we're taking the story, just some excerpts from some of the history of Dead House and the formation of Dead House and Nagosawa. There's some scenes in there with some elder gods, and I think it hopefully will give people who are interested in seeing where the content is going an idea of where we want to take it. And so, yeah, I would check it out if you're interested in narrative. There's some, I put out more narrative, or we've put out more narrative now than I ever have for any previous game. Usually I don't talk about story at all, but if we're going to do this right, we're going to create a living, breathing world. I want feedback, or we want to get feedback out there as soon as possible. So whatever we can do to get feedback, and if people want to post on the forums or let us know in Discord what they think of some of the writing, because we have a lot of content to create for this game. So any feedback that we get will make the game better.
I love this. There's lots of towns to explore in this game. I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. Lots of secrets to uncover here, and chests.
Well, we're going to be making lots of towns, so Dead House Sonata is going to have lots of towns too.
For Dead House Sonata, are you looking at incorporating stealth kills and backstab and so forth at surprise attacks on unsuspecting enemies?
That's a good question. I don't know if we have an answer for that yet. I think it's possible, but in the grand scheme of things, it would be probably a skill tree and direction you'd want to go down. I think it's possible. We've talked about some particular classes like the Banshee or the Wraith, where we could potentially do and have some stealth kills. And I know this is unfair to talk about it right now, but the classes really do play so differently. The Vampire right now is pretty close to Kain with some mixing of 2 human, a very sort of martial-like character. But, excuse me, the Banshee or the Wraith, totally different. They work off totally different axioms, and so those are the character classes they will likely fit in. And also, because they're ethereal classes, you can do a lot more things. And you can still go into Mistform as a vampire, of course, with our death system, but these are classes that that's their natural state, where they're always ethereal. So there'll be some cool things associated with that too. So it's possible. I want to before we verify anything like that, it's going to really come out in the design. But if the community really wants something like that, feedback again in Discord and the forums, let us know, because we work for gamers and we're going to try to make the game the best it can be. So
how much time do you expect each age to span? And is there going to be a lengthy gap in between them, or how will that work exactly?
So that's a good question. Right now, we're roughly specking out around 6 months per age. That's really some feedback we're going to be looking to from the community. I think at first, the first age is there's going to be a lot of work to do through not only just development but getting feedback. We're going to be going, once one age ends, another age is going to begin right away. And if once we start really feeling comfortable with the stability of the game and the feedback that we're receiving, we can then start opening up. Do we want to make these faster or slower? Or if we're on the first age and people are like, you got a lot more work to do, maybe we'll lengthen the age out depending on how people feel and some of the mechanics that we have planned for it. So it's really malleable, but right now we're estimating 6 months. It could go down to 3 months. It could go up to a year. We're looking for feedback from the player base on that. As far as I'm aware, we haven't seen anyone do ages before. I haven't seen it. So it's always, there's so many games out there you don't know, but I think it's a pretty interesting idea. So hopefully there's some ghosts, and but that's our plan. I hope that makes sense.
I have a question for you, Dennis.
Shoot.
What is this thing? I just picked up these 2 cards. It's this ball of... Is it blood? Is it like a...
Fire it. Watch what happens.
Oh, I don't want to waste that. Okay.
No, do it.
Let me find some Randoni. Oh my gosh.
Implode. You can actually, in the inventory, you can go over and it'll give you a description of what it is.
Yes.
Right?
I always forget about...
Yeah. That's one of the cool things that we did. Yeah, go into the inventory. There's lots of nice voiceovers. And we'll be doing that in Dead House as well.
Is that the Dark Diary? Or is
No,
there
you got to
actual-
go in the inventory. This is not the inventory.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Pause, I think. There you go.
All right, so, I've got a question here from, I'm not sure if it's Golden Zahn or Golden Jean, but besides humans and other houses, will we be able to fight against monsters as well?
Yes, absolutely. There are entire houses based off of non-humans that we haven't really announced yet, but that's going to be part of the fun of when we introduce PvP, is to have some pretty interesting asymmetrical combat for the House of the Dead and other houses. So as an example, one of the houses that I think I've talked about, well maybe I haven't, but I think I have, is Giga House, which is House of the Giants.
Yes.
So imagine having undead fighting giants, and we have some really fun ideas with that planned. But that's way far in the future, of course, but we have lots of plans for lots of houses, so the answer is 100% yes.
This town's having a bad day.
You are cleaning out this town.
Oh, there's very few games where I feel okay about, killing a whole bunch of people.
You're not killing for sport anymore. Are you killing for sport?
I'm just killing for sport.
Not for need.
Well, I want to get the secrets.
Secrets? You don't get secrets by killing people.
I know that.
This is another one from Golden Zahn. Are we going to be able to modify our character model after we create them?
Yes. First of all, of course, as an action RPG, there's going to be various armors and stuff like that. I assume that this is not what he's talking about. I assume he's talking about the base model that goes underneath all of this stuff. Yeah, absolutely. We're really we're going to look to see how detailed we're going to go with that. One of the concepts we're currently playing with right now, this is early, I'm kind of excited about it, but it's called Age of Death. And that's going to be, when you create your character, how long have you been dead? So are you going to be ripe? You can see that kind of illustrated in the forms or not. Are you newly dead and ripe, where your body is still pretty much all there? Or have you been dead 10,000 years and all that's left of you is dust. And how can we represent that within the world when you're creating your character? So and how will it change the gameplay by having your character different that way? And also, once you're in the game, what will aging do if you're essentially immortal, and what will we do to bodies as things go along? And some it will have some impacts. We're still, this is in the early design stages right now, but these are some of the ideas we're thinking about beyond just, changing your hair color and changing your body type and all that kind of normal stuff. So we do have plans for that. Again, they're very, very early, but that's the direction we're going in. We don't want to hard commit to it at this point yet.
Explain. What is this? Is this one of those moon caves that I've heard about?
Yeah, I think this is timed on, this will open during a full moon.
Full moon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to collect the feedback of players when the volume of them increases to huge numbers, so tens of thousands of players, and if so, how would that work?
100% absolutely, and I guess we can have a minor announcement now. We'll be having people do this full-time as a job, and we'll be introducing, we're going to call them community heralds, where they will be advocates for the community, and we're actually getting a tremendous amount of feedback already, even though we're just starting, and we're super happy about that. If you look at the Discord now, it's sort of exploded with questions and comments, and things are starting to pile up. So we'll be having someone new join us next week, and he'll be introducing himself. The bottom line is we will have a dedicated team that's all that they will do.
Oh, wow. All right. Are you at all worried about player synergy in the game if they're playing different undead? That's from Cyan Stargazer on Twitch.
It depends what they mean by player synergy. Does that mean will the classes balance well together? I don't think it's a worry. I think it's going to be pretty fun and watch the different ways in which different classes work together. Players are going to figure out pretty quickly what the best combinations of classes are. In the end, we're going to make sure that all classes can play with other classes, but there's going to be some classes with healing abilities. The vampire's got self-healing abilities, kind of a hybrid, but there'll be other classes that can heal other classes as well. So it will depend on how people want to play the game. But I think it should be no difficult, any more difficult than any other co-op multiplayer game in that way. Not to say it's easy, but I don't think it's going to be any harder either.
Chat's telling me to go north.
Go north.
And I will do just that. Oh my goodness.
Are there going to be role-playing opportunities? This is a question from Smoke Bermondon on Twitch. You spoke a little bit about having sort of player-created Dungeons & Dragons style campaigns, but I'm thinking that they're looking for more detail on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea, really what we want to do that's another influence, I think, since I'm making Legacy of Kain that's really changed my opinion on things. I played a lot more tabletop games previously. I played a lot more tabletop games since the time I made Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. In the experience of sitting down with people at a table and seeing how the role-playing works and seeing how the camaraderie is, I think that those aspects are pretty huge, and really from a standpoint of allowing players to LARP and role play within the game is going to be a big deal. We'll be introducing in the future many things that will allow players to do that, and procedurally and also it's the best way to describe it. We're really going to record I guess is the best way to describe it. What players do in Dead House Sonata will sort of echo in the history. So with the ages, and as you start doing these things, there will be ways to record and show other people what you're doing and what you have done, and telling those stories and role-playing around those stories. One of the things, as an example, some of the voice skinning technology, that we're going to be incorporating in the game is really cool, where you can change the way your voice sounds. All of those kind of things will be, putting in the game, allowing these tools for people to use if they want to use them. And that will allow various different role-playing aspects to the game that we think people will find pretty unique. And they will be embedded in the game as well, and not just fluff, not just cool toys. There's some pretty cool things that we have planned that are unannounced right now. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I like the sound of that voice scanning capability in particular. That sounds pretty neat.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. It's really leading edge stuff, and we're really looking forward to that.
I've got another question from a Twitch viewer here. Is it true Blood Omen originally was supposed to be more non-linear in terms of how you go about restoring the pillars? That's from James X. Carmichael.
So some of the early designs, it may have been that way. I think I would say about halfway through the game, we started really pulling it in because the world was so large. And I think the original way we thought about it was to do it non-linearly, but then it became very difficult to put the story together in a cohesive way. And I think we were trying so many things don't forget, this was our first narrative-driven game, was Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. And we were leaning towards that way, but I think we pulled it in pretty quickly. That's more of a story, certainly from Eternal Darkness, that I definitely recall. Eternal Darkness was definitely supposed to be non-linear and was built that way to be non-linear. That's why the stories were structured in the way they were. Look, you found a brothel.
I found a brothel.
Check it out. I think we did have early ideas of that, but we pulled it in pretty quickly to be linear and to tell just a good story. We didn't, really building up the confidence to tell a story within the Blood Omen universe was quite hard. It was our first time, and we really wanted to leave a good impression. So we did try to restrict some of the things we were doing to, I guess the right word is, to keep it simple, stupid in some ways, to make sure the experience for the gamer was the best it could be. So I do remember slightly that, a little bit of that, but it wasn't, we didn't go very far with that, say compared to like Eternal Darkness, where we wanted it to be non-linear until, really close to the end, where we decided to pull it in as well.
Do you have any plans to... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I keep accidentally using the spell that makes the room brighter for no reason.
You're doing well. You're getting there.
Just a lot of looting right now.
I don't think the chat's yelling at you anymore. No more Fs.
Yeah, can we get a rating, Scott?
Do you have any plans to allow mods to the game? This is another one from Golden Zon.
Yeah, mods, possibly. More than that, though, as you can see with our partnering with the Project Dios team, we want the tools out there where people can create their own adventures and tell their own stories. And there's a real big reason why we want to do that. I'm a huge Game of Thrones, or was a huge Game of Thrones TV series fan, and generally the common denominator out there is, the last season was very disappointing with people because of the ending, because it was rushed, because the showrunners wanted to move on to something else, or George R.R. Martin didn't write those parts, therefore, it wasn't as good. And I think those are all reasonable theories. But I have another theory, and here's my sort of theory to this and why I'm such a big believer in community-driven content. When Game of Thrones really exploded onto the scene for the TV show, hundreds, if not thousands, I would say thousands of YouTube channels coming up with their own theories on why or where they thought the story was going to go started emerging. And don't destroy the couch, Callie. So what started happening is a lot of these theories were just junk and they didn't make any sense. But a few of the theories were actually quite good and very thoughtful. And then all of these different groups started listening to each other, and suddenly they started compiling a body of knowledge that was outpacing the showrunners, and a room of, say, 20 or 30 writers for the show couldn't possibly keep up with these millions of people contributing to the story and the content. And when you look at that, I think there's an argument to be made, and it's not to really take away from any of the other arguments that it would have been better if George R. R. Martin had written the stories. But imagine if we can create the tools to have people, contribute to the community, and also help build the world of Dead House Sonata. Then we're just going to get a better universe because the community is creating things. So many times I've had people ask me, what do you think about this story for Eternal Darkness, or what do you think about this story for Legacy of Kain? And so we're going to let the community, through tools, I know that's not exactly modding, but build their own levels, tell their own stories, create their own adventures, so others can enjoy them as well, and just make a better universe for everyone. So I am a big believer in community-driven content. Whether we actually mod the game, depending on what your definition of a mod is, as long as it doesn't allow people to cheat and get advantages over other people, then I would expect that we would allow that. Anything else, though, we'd probably want to stop. It's also going to depend on the structure and how we have the server set up. Mods on the client might be more difficult, but we are big believers in getting the community involved as much as possible. So this is looking like some S&M things happening here, buddy.
Yeah, I guess. Is that the story behind this room, or is there?
Help me, kind sir.
Okay, well, I'll get you out of it.
Will players be able to make non-player character minions, so vampires, for example, like Kain's lieutenants in Soul Reaver and the other sequels, or will the undead be able to have human slaves doing their bidding, for example? It's kind of a combination of questions from K Masterlock on Twitch and Golden Zon.
Yeah, I can't see a game with vampires without vampire slaves and stuff like that. So yeah, absolutely. I think that there's dialogue there, buddy. So yes, the answer is yes. We have a whole plethora of fun things planned in that area that we will roll out, and we'll look forward to feedback once we start doing it.
That's a big thing with the Lich.
Oh yes.
The Lich uses it can capture enemies and uses phylacteries and use their health to use spells and such. Right. And that's really cool. Yeah,
the idea of the Lich as an example when casting magic, which Ian was discussing, is basically you need energy from somewhere. Ironically echoed recently in the Witcher series as well. So when you cast magic, you need to take the energy from somewhere. So Liches, of course, rather than taking it from their own physical body, which is already in rough shape, they can capture human slaves and use them as power sources for their spells. And well, that's not very nice to the humans, but Liches got to cast their spells. Them's the breaks. Look at you. You're like a mass murderer.
Well, what if there's secrets?
One question I have, since Ian just passed it, is that fellow with the pot, kind of the madman. The first time I played through this game was the PC version, and I came away from that thinking that was Mobius in disguise. And I talked to some people later about this who said, no, you're crazy, that never happened in the game. And the dialogue is actually slightly different in the PC version versus the PlayStation version. So I'm curious what your take is on that. Is that Mobius, or is that just a random madman?
I'm trying to remember. I'm going to guess the dialogue was different in the PC version because they had an outdated version of the script. Can you... So Ben, I'm asking this because I want to refresh my own memory. Because I kind of lean towards... Did I say it was crazy that was... Or did someone else say, no, it was crazy that wasn't Mobius?
Oh, it was not you. It was another fan.
Yeah, I think because I do think that was kind of the idea, was kind of like a deep secret that kind of was Mobius, but I can't remember the dialogue itself. We had all kinds of little things in the game like that all over the place. It was definitely meant to be kind of like a madman. Look at you.
It's fun.
Yeah, and but I would have to hear the differences in the dialogue and see what edits. But I think in the PC version they had a dated version of the script, so it was slightly out of date.
No, that makes sense. Thank you. Here's another question from Twitch. This is from Joshua Dingley. Besides the planned sequel, how far would the story of Kain, in terms of things like theology and mythology, developed in future sequels that you had planned?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is we would have went down a completely different pathway. It's the best way to describe it. The way that I generally do world building, and the way that world building was done for the sequels was, I guess, different ways. Amy's type of world building, very Hollywood-like 3-act narrative, all of that stuff. I think that's a statue. You got to figure out how to get back there. And it generally tends to focus on characters a lot, and the type of world building that I do and storytelling that I do is I don't follow necessarily a 3-act narrative at all. It's more Tolkien-esque, and I guess the development of the universe and the number of characters in the game, even if you look at Blood Omen Legacy of Kain and then you look at the sequels that follow, there's a much larger set of characters in the first game than there was in any, from what I saw anyway. If I'm wrong on this, I apologize, but it looked like we always had a larger cast of characters. And we would have gone, I guess, naturally where I'm taking Dead House now, with multiple different worlds and different houses and universes all clashing together. And when I created the whole idea and the concept of the Pillars of Nosgoth, the Pillars of Nosgoth was there for a specific reason, and I've never told anyone. So that, where I want to take things now, the sort of ideas that I had in mind for that, I'm now exploring in Dead House Sonata. So I really look forward to seeing how that is received by the community, and hopefully something that they liked. And just to be clear, I think they did a great job with the games afterwards, and this is not a criticism. It's just that they did things differently than I would have done, and it took a hard vector away from where we were going to take it. So
I'm getting words in the chat that I should press circle 3 times. Well, I'm playing on an Xbox controller, so I don't know which one circle is.
Circle's the outside. No, inside. Maybe inside.
Can we ask the chat for clarification?
Ben, do you know what he's got to do here? Because I actually don't remember.
Does he need to smash that with the... No, he doesn't have the mace yet.
You don't have the mace.
Can he get through there without the mace?
I don't think he can. That's what I thought. Yeah, there's a mace. It's another weapon coming up.
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Also, I have a question. What are these symbols? Some of the dungeons start with these symbols. Does that mean it's a secret? Does that mean it's...
Those are some of the runes we created for the game. They were sort of symbolic for the sort of area that you were in and stuff.
Okay, so I should come back here when I have the mace.
Yep.
I can do that.
Yes. Yep.
Sounds
it
cool.
It is a semi-open world, so yeah.
That guy was just waiting for me.
Anyway, hopefully that was a satisfying answer to that question. It's been asked a lot where we've taken it in just a very different direction.
Were there, so a very different direction overall, were there any elements of what you had planned that they incorporated, or was that just completely disregarded?
Never told them where we were taking it, ever. So they didn't know.
Here's another Twitch question, again from James X. Carmichael. What other game series do you folks enjoy playing during your time off?
Do you want to answer that one to start, and then I'll jump in?
Yeah. Well, recently we've been playing mostly Warframe. I really like the Warframe games. When I'm not playing Warframe, I'm usually playing horror games like mostly indie titles. I like the Evil Within franchise. Cry of Fear is a personal favorite horror game, and then yeah, other than that, I mean Roller Coaster Tycoon all the way.
That's funny.
But I'd say Warframe's my main game right now.
For those who are unaware, Digital Extremes, the creators of Warframe, are an hour and a half away from us in London. So we know a lot of people there. There's a lot of ex-Silicon Knights people. I'm really good friends with the Smaltzes who started and founded that company. Yeah, so they're a great group, and Ian's a massive fan of that game. I think it's a great game, and there's, I think, a really good example of a ethical free-to-play model, which is what we'll be following for Dead House Sonata as well. It's always great to get advice from them on when we have ideas and when we're throwing them out there. For me personally, lately I've been playing a lot of Gwent, and I've been just playing around with a lot of indie games. Why am I playing a lot of indie games right now? I've been playing a lot of indie games for the last couple of years, and I have to play more Witcher, quite frankly. But I really think that the AAA market has become quite stale, and I know the polish and graphical fidelity of some of the things that are being made are pretty fantastic. However, when it comes to any kind of what I would call innovation or exciting developments, I haven't really seen a lot of that in AAA, so I haven't been really pulled that way a lot. I've been playing a lot of PC lately, more than anything, Bloodborne I really loved, of course. That was fantastic. But I haven't played that lately. So I guess those are the games. I've been playing a lot of PC indie games lately, but that's just more of a matter of how I feel. Often when I'll play a video game, it's just to decompress because there's so much going on. There's so many balls in the air, and and other than that, I'll be painting models in Graffiti Wars and stuff like that to relax too. So anyway, so that's what I'm playing mostly. So lately it's been Gwent. I've been playing a lot of Gwent lately, but who knows what it's going to be. I've been just starting to examine this game called Star Sector, which is an indie game that looks pretty interesting. I've had it for a while, but I haven't really dove into it. I just play a lot of stuff, whatever. So,
what was your vision for the ultimate villain in the Blood Omen Legacy of Kain universe? Was it the sort of elder god figure at the end of that game, or something else?
Yeah, it was. So the Elder God at the end of that game was only the first step onto where we were going to take it. And I'm a big believer in hierarchies and slowly rolling. Even though Blood Omen Legacy of Kain was a huge world, I think showing that Nosgoth was going to be a small part of that story would then have been the next step. And then from there, introducing many different elder gods, all with their different machinations, which is one of the reasons I'm so impressed with Steven Erikson. I think he did that very well. I think he created a universe that I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing. It's really up there with Tolkien. I think that those things for me are quite interesting. So Star Wars, when I first saw Star Wars, it's hard to believe how old it is now, 40 years ago, but I remember when I first saw the Stormtroopers, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I got brought to the next level with Darth Vader, and I thought, wow, that's really, really cool. And then you saw the Emperor, and I was like, wow, this type of hierarchy, knowing that the world is just always bigger, and that's what really pulled me towards the sort of Tolkien-esque design of worlds and world building compared to sort of the 3-act narrative in Hollywood. And I think the 3-act narrative in Hollywood gives you really good dialogue and really good scripts and really helps contain things, but the world building that you get, which quite frankly is more realistic in the world, where there's not one or two key players that change everything, where there's really a combinations of hundreds of people. Yeah, time, there you go. I think that really is illustrative of where the story was going in Legacy of Kain from my perspective, and that's where we're going to take Dead House Sonata as well. So Dead House Sonata is one of the first houses. As we start rolling out different houses, man, is the game going to change. It's going to change a lot. So we're starting off and we have 7 classes. Imagine for every house that we roll out, we introduce another 7 classes. So we Giga House, there's 7 classes of giants. And then we start introducing more classes within the House of the Dead. And we introduce a 3rd house, and then we have more classes with that. And then we introduce other classes within the different houses. And it really is akin to one of my favorite games, still to this day, which is Heroes of Might and Magic. I love Heroes of Might and Magic. So that's kind of the macro goal of where we want to take things. And then, of course, contain that all within a huge narrative. So that's the idea.
Oh, that should be really great. Reina Adrian on Twitch is asking, in your version of the story, the backstory for Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, who built the pillars?
Ooh, I want to hear this one.
That's a good question. So the pillars were built to start a chain of events that would have an effect and essentially act as an incubator for what Kain was to become and what his role was outside of Nosgoth. And introducing him as a particular solution to a much bigger problem that was not talked about. So the Elder Gods, like one of the ones that we introduced at the end of Legacy of Kain, the Dark Entity, were the people who built the pillars.
All right. Aesir Hod on Twitch is asking, was #Gik the name of the entity at the end of the game, or was that a different character? So that name is mentioned in the sort of dark tome in the game, but are they actually intended to be the same character?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Is there a story behind the optional Lost City area in the game with the werewolves, and just the werewolves in general?
So we put that together, and we it was kind of like a Lost Tales, and we wanted to put some narrative in there, but we just didn't have time. So there was some stuff planned for that, but we never got around to it, unfortunately. So the answer is sort of, I guess. I don't want to come out and completely say we had something planned, but when we were building the levels, see, this was one of the things that really helped Legacy of Kain grow, is that we had dedicated people just building a map editor, and that started with Dark Legions, where so you can walk around and people won't think you're a vampire. So yeah, you can.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, and that's important for other things. The chopping block.
That's not sketchy at all.
It was so fun making all these signs up. We were just trying to see how far we could push it. And the thing is, you have to remember that there were a lot of people looking at the game censor-wise. And then when we had the bloody battlefield, people were like, wow, we've never seen this kind of craziness in the game before. But so the answer is, we had thoughts on a story and a direction, but we really didn't develop them that much. But it, follow-ups, we certainly would have talked about how the, certainly the lycanthropes would have fit in with the vampires, and how a whole a community of werewolves would have sort of fit in. So it would have been a lot of fun. But we had ideas, but not fully developed is the answer.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any planned content that's exclusive to either the single player or the co-op version of Dead House Sonata? That's from Golden Zana on Discord.
Well, I think in some ways there has to be, simply by design, because there's some things you can do cooperatively and some things you could really only do from a single player point of view. It's really important from our perspective that we don't want to force co-op on people if they don't want to do co-op, but for those who do want to do co-op, and it's, in some sense, what video games allowed were people to have a Dungeons and Dragons experience on their own, where the dungeon master is the computer and they could experience this adventure on their own. Before then, Dungeons and Dragons, you pretty much had to have at least 2 people, and then parties of 5 or 6 became much more fun. So I think you'll see content around both. and I think you'll see more. What's the right word? More content, more sort of procedurally driven stuff for the cooperative. But we really want to make sure there's a good story for people who just want to sit back and play a single player game. We want to make sure that that experience is very strong. So I would think the answer is yes. That's the only way I can see it. Now certainly everyone will be able to experience it either way. You just have to get together with co-op, or so. But yes, I think that's the answer.
That makes sense. So you got a couple people, including myself, curious with your comment about censors. How many complaints do you get? How bad were they, and was that pre-ESRB? I can't remember. Part of that is from K Masterlock on Twitch.
Yeah, geez, I can't even remember if it was pre-ESRB. I remember there were concerns about it, and we just didn't care. I guess that's the only way to describe it. We would just do things, and people would be like, "Can you do that?" And we're like, "We don't know. We're just going to do it." And even on the back of the box cover, I think they had like the battlefield. We were one of the unsung heroes of Blood Omen Legacy of Kain was Jim Curry, and he actually was actively involved. I love that.
What was that? That was amazing.
Yeah. So if people walk into that, it's kind of like they will start to melt as well. It's really cool, man. You got to do it more. Do it. It's really good in the war part too. You throw them, and it's like font of putrescence where people just follow into it and start melting.
Okay.
These are the kind of. This is what's another good reason for you to play, because it'll show you where I want to go with that house. Anyway, and I think that's where we're going to go with Dead House Sonata as well. There's certainly a lot of censorship out there right now too. And certainly we're going to be tasteful, but in the end, we're here to make the best game possible, and we want to make it fun, and we want to make it interesting, and it's going to be aimed at adults, because that's where you're going to follow the golden rule of let's make something you want to play yourself. And when it brings back fantastic memories to see all this stuff when Ian's running around exploring all these spells and goes, oh, that's really cool. That is the kind of thing that makes me want to play video games. Like seeing that flayed body fall I remember when we put that in, we had so much fun. We were doing those, we'd be laughing, we'd be like, and then we'd show people who hadn't seen it before, they'd be like, oh my God, that's gross. And we'd be like, yeah, isn't it awesome? Those are the kind of things in my mind that really make video games worth playing, is you can do stuff, like that. And, just watching Ian, watching him, do all this stuff and figuring out that, he's got all of these tools at his disposal that are powers of the vampire that people really hadn't explored that much in video games before. And there's so much more we can do with the realm of the undead. And then on top of that, when we start introducing the other houses, we can have so much more fun as well. So yeah, when it comes to censors, there was definitely some concern. I think it was pre-ESRB, but I'm not sure. The ESRB might have just been coming in at the time. And again, the unsung hero, Jim Curry, marketing, he really was like, just go for it. And so we went for it. And he actually contributed to the script quite a bit. Him and I would talk about the script quite often, and he was a great guy, and I really enjoyed working with him. From a marketing perspective, he was one of the biggest contributors to Legacy of Kain in that regard, especially to the script. A lot of people thought that Amy Hennig contributed to the script in Blood Omen, but the script was well done, and we were finished it with the recording studio by the time she even started the project. So she actually didn't contribute to the story at all in Blood Omen. So so just some interesting factoids there.
This is a combination of questions, mostly from Raina Audrin on Twitch, but also a little bit fed in from something Mama Robotnik sent me earlier today. Ian hasn't gotten to Avernus Cathedral yet, but there's some very elaborate sections of that are set in sort of heaven and hell. Are those intended to be physically part of the cathedral? Are they literally those different planes of existence, or some magical experience, or what's going on there?
The idea is that it was so when we started building that level, we wanted to base it off of Dante's Inferno and to be heaven and hell. So the idea was that it was literally those areas, and we wanted. One of the things that we did with Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, we had a lot of tile sets that you see here that get used quite often, but we wanted to have like 25% of the game that had these sort of awe-inspiring areas. And what we would do, even though this was a tile-based engine, we render out, specifically in 3D Studios Max, some of the most beautiful areas with murals as best we could. So people would see them and go, wow, this looks really cool. And that, we spent a lot of time on those, even though it was a smaller percentage of the area. We wanted people to come into what we call beauty shots. We're actually taking that exact same formula with Dead House Sonata, and right now everyone's seeing a town, which is we're calling it tile sets for the procedural generation, and it has some very similar concepts, but the town is not something that's particularly going to be awe-inspiring. You're going to see the Dark Cathedral that's coming for Dead House, and it will have several also sort of awe-inspiring moments like that in Avernus, where it is sort of based off Dante's Inferno, and that was the idea with that. So I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, thank you. Will Dead House Sonata be playable offline? That's from Golden Zon on Discord.
No, we have no plans for making it playable offline. There's always going to be a login required. Now, if you're playing single player, the bandwidth requirements are going to be quite low. What's a good example? Just like Path of Exile, or even when you're playing single player in Warframe, there's not a lot of requirements once you're actually in the game for multiplayer, right? But you're always going to have to be online with Dead House. Is that correct?
Yeah.
With Warframe, I'm asking, is it correct?
Yeah, you always have to be online with Warframe.
Yeah, so it'll be very similar to Path of Exile or Warframe. So there will be no offline single player. That's not fun.
What are your thoughts on how music affects how a story is told in games? That's from Joshua Dinkley on Twitch.
I'm a huge believer in music is key, quite frankly. And talking with Steve Kupani, who's doing the music for Dead House Sonata, we've talked about that quite a bit. We've talked about having adaptive procedural music for Dead House, which we will be doing. And these are things I talked about with Steve Hennepin back in the day when we were working on, Legacy of Kain. Man, we worked on so many projects together, Steve Hennepin and I, so almost every major project I was on, Steve worked on. These are things that I find are really important and key. Audio is one of the what I would call centrifugal factors in which makes a game, separates the fantastic games from the just really good games. Music is super important. It's good to see you're having fun, by the way, Ian. I can tell.
Having a lot of fun. I've gotten a bit better since last time around, so I'm a bit less frustrated with.
Still,
I say that, but obviously, the second I say I'm getting better, I get destroyed.
Are the just a quick question for the chat? Are the questions flowing better now? Are we doing a better job on getting questions out there quicker?
I think we've got plenty of questions.
Okay, good.
So this seems to be working really well.
All right, good stuff.
Blood Omen on Twitch is asking about the sort of community-driven adventures that you've discussed. How do you feel about community voice acting?
I love it, and we want to do ways of allowing that to happen. And not just to be clear too, when people create stuff for the community, we want to make what's called a micro platform where people will be able to monetize their content. So it just won't be, what's the right word, a volunteer work. We're not looking to take advantage of the community whatsoever. And if people make great stuff and it's worth purchasing, we want people to be able to sell it and have an opportunity to really make contributions beyond what I would call just volunteer work. And so yeah, we want people to be able to do a great job and feel good about it, and be paid for that too.
So
Excellent.
I must apologize. I can't really hear the game at all, just a little bit. So I'm missing narrative. Where am I?
You're in Nupraptor's retreat.
Okay.
The first person who made all the pillars go insane and corrupt.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't like how slow that guy's walking. You know someone's really powerful when
they
he's
walk slow?
walking slowly through a dungeon full of dead bodies.
How can solo players have a positive influence on the storyline of Dead House Sonata if they prefer kind of playing by themselves in the single player mode versus participating in forums and social media? That's from Golden Zana on Discord.
Right. I think that's a good question, and the answer is that's on us to record great deeds. So as an example, say there's someone who only plays single player, and they are the first one to do X, like kill an elder god, then that story can become embedded into the mythos of Dead House Sonata, and that player doesn't have to do anything. It will just be, so say Golden Zon is the first player in Dead House Sonata to destroy the dark entity, then in the first age, that story and that myth that will later become legend will be told for everyone, and those will have echoing effects on how he does it and which ways that he does it will have effects throughout all the different ages, and decisions that that person may make while he goes through that trial will also have lasting effects. So yeah, you don't there are many ways that we can do this that don't require people to participate in the forums or have to be writers, because that's not what real life is like. Oftentimes, you have people who like to tell stories, and then you have other times where people are just doers, and they just do and go do things, and then other people tell what those brave souls did, and that's going to be up to us to make sure we have the ability to do that in the game, and that's the goal. So that's how I would answer that question.
Thank you. Reyna Adrian on Twitch is asking about there are ghosts in Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. Can you tell us a little bit about how the afterlife works in your version of that world?
In Legacy of Kain or in Dead House?
In Legacy of Kain.
Well, that's going back a long way. So the way we looked at ghosts in Blood Omen Legacy of Kain is we looked at different types of substance, and ghosts were made of pure energy, and therefore by killing the ghosts you could get energy from them, where if they were obviously just regular human, you would get their blood, and if they were poisoned, they would hurt you if you took their blood. And the idea of the actual beings themselves, we didn't really develop the lore so much in that direction, but it was really more of a design system matrix where I knew where we were going with the blood armors and all the different armors and all the different combinations of weapons, and so we said let's do a system that really gave you a lot of reward and bonuses. And as you started to understand the system, so when you had the armor that would automatically suck blood with the axes, knowing that if you did that around poison enemies, that would be very bad. Or using the Soul Reaver, that you couldn't get blood from anything. It was super powerful, but after a while, you just couldn't continue to use it. So there was no real one weapon is best at all times. So that was kind of the idea with the ghosts. The ghosts were sort of ways to get energy and magic when you're low on magic.
All right. Here's another question from Golden Zon on Discord. In the recent video that you showed where you introduced the concept of ages, you talk about players in the first stage having a huge impact on how the game develops over time. How will that be diminished over time as more and more people join the game? Or to phrase it maybe slightly differently, how will that lasting impact be retained as more people play and contribute to the world?
Yeah, so what you're really talking about there is we have to introduce, from a design perspective, a kind of decay, but at the same time, there needs to be lasting effects of very incredible things that happened in the first age. So whether a player, like I said, kills a dark entity, say, and I'm just making this up on the fly as we go, that story will always be remembered. But other things will, over the different ages, will have less and less effect. But some will have monumental effects that will be constant throughout the entire, world landscape as we create this living and breathing universe. And certainly we always want to watch out for things that are problematic, but what's going to happen is we're going to have to start having this spiraling history, which is just like the world history. There's a lot eventually becomes lost after a while, but a lot of things are still remembered. Like we still talk about Greece, there's all the myths of Atlantis and all of those things that I find particularly interesting. And so that's how we would approach it. So we'd have a system to deal with that.
Excellent. Sorry, I'm just trying to rephrase this here. Okay, so Kain Masterlock on Twitch is asking about what's the extent of the microtransaction model? So will players be able to design character models, armor, weapons, and so forth, or is it just the story components?
So the microtransaction model, we're approaching it, just to be clear, so we're going to be all entirely ethical, so it's going to be all cosmetic. That's where we're going with it. Now, when it comes to the player-created content, I would say mostly story-driven. We could there's a potential problem if you start introducing design of weapons and stuff. So it's going to be very content orientated. You have to really draw what I would call a pretty hard line for gameplay. If we start affecting gameplay where someone creates God weapon number 1 and they give it away, then even though the actual content itself might be terrible, to get that 100 out of 10 weapon, and people would just play it to get that powerful weapon, we can't allow things like that. We don't want to allow people to break the game. So I think you're really looking at from an experience and a narrative perspective, and then also a cosmetic perspective that we would allow people to do community created content.
All right. Science Stargazer on Twitch is curious about this is also about the ages question. So if the characters go down in history in the game world, will there be non-player character reactions to the players based on those deeds and so forth?
Yeah, that makes it all the more fun. So that's the plan. You want to integrate these systems so they're completely cohesive with everything within the game design, within the world that you play, within other players if you play co-op. We want to try to expand that all as much as possible.
Excellent. I have a small collection of questions that I got from Mama Robotnik and Acer Hod earlier today. I'll work a couple of these in here. So later in the game, Ian is going to find Mobius's museum of artifacts from history, and something that a lot of people have noticed in there is a long gun. Some people think it's a shotgun or a blunderbuss, but it's some sort of firearm. Was there a story in anyone's mind behind that, or is it more of a, let's put the alien skull in the Predator ship and see what people dream up as a result kind of thing?
Yeah, more towards the latter. That was really to show that Mobius could alter time, and I know at one point, I know people know this story because it's an old story, but the Soul Reaver weapon itself was actually a weapon to human, but it was actually a gun. It wasn't a sword, and so that's that particular part was just to do some fun things in the museum. And when we had people making the games, and this goes back to the ghost question as well, you could turn any character, when you would drop the character in the map editor and just say, make this character a ghost, and it would automatically set all the values and the transparencies, and the behaviors would change automatically. So people actually had quite a bit of. It's very cool. See, this is like one of the beauty rooms we would talk about, right? Where this is, even though it looks like a tile set, it's all pre-rendered. Anyway, this would be an example of how I'd like to see the community-driven content go as well, where we provide the tools and allow people's creativity to take it anywhere, because I do think the community can all coming together can do much more than what we could ever do. And so that's why we're big believers in letting the community contribute to this world that we're creating. We think it'll make it a better world.
Excellent. Let's see here. At some point, there was a Saturn port of Blood Omen Legacy of Kain planned. How far along did that get, and were there any significant differences? Like, did you take advantage of the powerful 2D hardware in that platform or anything like that?
Oh yeah. So we had done. There was a game from Toys for Bob called The Horde, and Silicon Knights worked on The Horde. Actually, worked on Star Control 2 as well. I don't often list that as games that we've worked on. Zork Grand Inquisitor as well. So we had done the Saturn port of The Horde. So we were going to take it to that platform, but I think by the time the game was done, that platform had died, and there was no what's the right word? There wasn't enough economic plus to actually doing that, so it was eventually canceled. But yeah, we took advantage of all the hardware. The Saturn was a great system, and I personally loved it. But it just wasn't meant to be. So this happens all the time in the video game industry. So
that makes sense. James X Carmichael on Twitch is curious about: do you feel that too many sort of shades of gray characters and ambiguous morals can be a disadvantage? Is there a balance to be struck there between those kind of characters and more black and white characters?
That's a very good question. So I think by and large, I personally really like great characters, but you have to do it in the right way. It's not just enough. So I often say that, this is that Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, one of the big influences was the Unforgiven, where the characters were gray, and but you have to develop the characters. They have to change. They essentially, you have to find out if you hit teleporters, it teleports you back. So this is kind of like a puzzle.
Which ones are the teleporters?
You got to figure that out and how to find out how to see them. So the do they crap? Oh, light. Turn on. Oh, you're turning on light. There you go. I see. And sorry, it's been a while. I even forget these puzzles. So there you go. So I think gray is generally better because it's more realistic. And I don't think that any particular protagonist or villain or antagonist, I guess, really thinks that they're bad. So you have to give characters the right motivation. So you can certainly introduce them at first as being evil, but all characters have to be complex, which eventually makes them gray. So it's not the gray per se that I think is important. It's the complexity and the actual development of the characters that makes them interesting and allows us to relate to them. So that's why I'm a big believer in that. So I would describe them as gray, but in many ways that's often too simplistic. It's that they need to be complex and they need to feel that they have motivations for what they're doing and why they're doing it. Some of those could be foibles, like being very selfish or being very greedy or being very angry and wanting revenge. Whatever those are, I think they're super important when you create a character. And when you throw someone into a world, say like Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, he starts out wanting to be very angry and wanting revenge, but we develop his character So he eventually starts to understand that, there are reasons, some negatives and some positives of what he's doing, and reasons why he should start considering things, that the world is bigger than what he considered, and getting revenge in the end really didn't help him that much. So that's my answer to that. So I agree that it's not really a matter of just being gray, and I know I've said that in the past. It's more of doing good character development and making things that the character can. This is where you want to use font of putrescence. The doing it in the right way, where the characters actually develop, will be rewarding for the gamer who gets to experience the story, because the characters come across as believable and empathetic. Even if you don't like them, you can relate to them in some way. So that's why I'm a big believer in that. So I don't know if I think I did answer the question. That's how I'd approach that issue.
Yeah. I completely agree, by the way, and I'm trying to imagine what it's like for someone who didn't live through that, but that was one of the things that first caught my interest in this series. Was there games like that were pretty much unheard of back then.
Yeah, we were fighting a lot of uphill battles. People didn't even think it was possible, and some of the things we were doing, these are the kind of things that you generally only saw in novels at the time. Certainly film and television, very few film and television ever approached this kind of thing. And I remember getting into Babylon 5 at the time, where it was a real world building arc. And so I'm just, these are the kind of stuff that I like to experience myself. So we can only again, just following the golden rule, do something that you want to do, that you want to play yourself. And so that's how we designed it. But I love that stuff. So
Absolutely.
I think when you leave a story, if it leaves you thinking about these kind of things afterwards, then you've left a good impression, and you've entertained people in the right and proper way. So
absolutely. The Blood Omen Legacy of Kain disc is packed pretty full as is. Were there any of the rendered cinematics that you wanted to include but couldn't? I know I saw storyboards at least for Malik's Bastion exploding and Kain escaping out of that, but I imagine there were others as well.
We could have had some planned. That was another crazy thing that I just loved about. We just didn't listen to anyone when they told us we couldn't do it. So we were doing cinema. Back then, doing cinema, this is when people were using like super high-end computers. We had like cheap software, using 3D Studios Max, and no one did them. But I think Kain had 20 minutes of cinema. And we did all the flight sequences, and believe it or not, I was involved. I actually created the Vista Pro sequences that did all those fractally generated terrains. I worked with Kevin Gordon, and he did the 3D Studios Max, where we composited, say, Malik's Bastion in the Vista Pro stuff. But the answer is, all the cinemas that we pretty much had planned, we did and got in the game. I don't think we cut too much. There certainly was probably a lot more storyboards, but when it came down to actually pulling the trigger, getting the voice acting, and having the script, and what we thought once we started creating these cinemas, and how long they actually took, once we started looking at the time frame, we pretty much got all in there that we wanted to get. So, and back then, don't forget, we were a pretty small team that was pretty ambitious back then. It just shows you what you can do with a small team. And right now, Apocalypse is pretty small too. I'm certain we'll get bigger in the future, but right now we're taking really small steps. And I do apologize for people when they look at the current build and say, hey, this isn't that. Just remember there's programmer art in there still, and we got a long way to go. But we do have Theron finally starting to clean out some of the animations, and we'll probably show that off in a few months.
Yeah, quick shout out to Theron, our character animator. He joined us 1 or 2 months ago.
Yes.
Great work so far. You're going to start seeing his work.
Yes. Start to see some good stuff.
I don't want to go through the skull.
Why? You have to.
Well, IRL. If I was, in a dungeon, as I do travel in dungeons, if I saw a doorway that was a skull, I don't know. Would you go through it?
By the way, someone caught my joke the other day from the other stream when you died in the place where you can't live before you become Kain, with you got the endless brigands, and I called you a noob. That's funny.
You can't. I mean,
you can't live, but I called you a noob anyway.
It's funny because I think I've seen a video of someone trying to stay alive as long as possible.
You can live for a long time.
You can live for a long time.
You have to be good though. Come on. So, got to get good. All right, sorry about that, Ben. I know we probably sidetracked some questions that we just. It's fun to see this. It's been a while, and now that the game's performing at a reasonable frame rate. Oh, you skipped a bunch of stuff.
Whoops.
Yeah, you want to get those secrets. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
I can't speak for anyone else, but going off on a tangent is one of the most interesting kinds of answers for me. You find out a lot of interesting things you wouldn't otherwise. Cool. Are there going to be objects in the environment that the player will have to examine or investigate to learn more about, like their history or their function? I'm imagining something. This is a question from Toby2 on Twitch. This is making me think of games that have kind of a scanner feature or maybe more detective-like investigation.
Generally, no. Dude, hit the switches.
I did hit a switch.
Oh, did you? Okay, sorry. Come on, get good. I'm just kidding.
True. No, you got me there.
We want systems in there where you can embed narrative, and we want that to come out where other players can embed that as they play and for other players to see later. So from that perspective, yes. From the perspective of a detailed, examine this for puzzles, that's to be determined, but I'm going to say we're going to be light on that stuff, if at all, have any of that.
All right. Let's see. Livin on Discord is asking, for the class system, once you pick a class, are there subclasses within that, or is it just one straight class from beginning to end?
No, we have subclasses planned. Go down, Ian.
Oh, is there more?
There's a Vista you missed. Yeah, I remember making this. So I think there's a Vista. Oh no, maybe it's out of the eyes. Sorry, my bad. Did you go to the right?
Yeah, that's where I came from.
Yeah, okay. So we generally have 3 subclasses planned, all for various different playstyles. Here are the vistas here throughout the eyes. Yeah, so you're going through the skull, the skull on top of the mountain. Yeah. Yeah, see? So yes, the answer is yes.
All right. So there are quite a few bosses in Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. Was Anarkroth ever planned as one that you would fight versus one that just appears in the final cinematic? And did you ever have plans to make separate boss battles for Bane and Jewel?
So when we were creating, one of the things that I always tried to do when we were creating the story was kind of break the rules. And they were important character elements, and we could have had them as bosses.
What changed? Sorry. Continue.
So that's a look into the potential future of way down the line of what can happen. So. But yeah, so there's a different voiceover that's hard for you to hear. So the answer is, when we were creating the story, we specifically stayed away to break some of the norms and expectations, and nothing was particularly planned, though we certainly could have had it, and we knew if we would have done a boss fight, how we would have done that particular aspect of the boss. However, we did it that way on purpose, just to show that there didn't have to be a boss fight for every main character and how some of it played out, because that's how real life is. It's not all about you. It's not always what's going on in the story doesn't always revolve around you. There are other players and other people in this grand story that are doing things, and often things can change. It's a very similar approach when we were doing there's Snapdraptor.
Is this a fight?
It's coming.
Oh, I have so much health.
Yeah, you're doing great. Good job. You got a Heart of Darkness, hopefully.
I have a few.
Okay. So when you get ready for that boss fight in Eternal Darkness where you're just crushed right away, these are the kind of things that we, just generally from my perspective, that I wanted to do to, just be different and do something that, would sort of break the norm.
Absolutely. James X. Carmichael on Twitch is curious about whether you've seen other depictions of vampires in video games that you really liked.
Yet crippled as he was, he did not yield without battle. Very well, old fool. If it is death
Other
you
depictions
seek,
of
I
vampires.
will not
That's an
deny
interesting
you.
question. Well, I think there's certainly been some good games with vampires, for sure. Have there been any particularly interesting vampires that I think the answer to that question is no. You want to go, you want to get through.
Did I skip something?
I'm forgetting myself, but no, this is right. What you've done is right.
Feel free to continue.
Ian, the boss is at the other end of the room, so you want to get down through the disappearing purple bits and hit him, and then he'll teleport back to the other end.
Yeah, so you go back
Oh,
and forth. This is
okay.
the boss
Well,
fight.
I'm going to die soon, but
That's okay. Keep going. You might be able to do it.
okay.
That's font of putrescence. Yeah.
I don't think I want to use
It doesn't matter. It's a boss. What are you doing?
that. Even
Of darkness.
I apologize.
the heart of darkness.
I forget some of the boss fight mechanics. So I would say there's certainly been some good games with vampires in them, and that's for sure. But I haven't seen any particularly interesting vampires. And in doing research for Dead House Sonata, there's certainly a lot of interesting vampires that are out there. And I think I would love to see some of that explored. We're so really Bram Stoker's version of Dracula and vampires is so dominant right now, and there's so many other interesting things. That's one of the reasons. A big inspiration, of course, for Legacy of Kain was Necroscope, which you almost made it.
First one of the night. I'll
First
take it.
death. It was on a boss, so it's not too bad. Where it was very visceral, and the vampires were sort of these alien beings, and I think it's a really good series and worth reading. That was just kind of a different, more visceral vampire, and that's where we really want to go. I think with Dead House is be visceral, which is lacking these days. In some games do it, but it's not very common, and I think that's where we want to go now. So yeah, I haven't. I'd love to do maybe just a dedicated stream on all the different cool types of vampires in the world
that'd be
that
cool.
are out there, because there's quite a few. There's some Malaysian type of vampires where the vampires like rip their torso away and start flying through and start eating like fetuses in women.
Yeah,
That-
Mananangao.
Yeah, that's some really cool stuff. I think that some of those being explored, they're pretty out there, and they're also pretty crazy. So I haven't seen any of that stuff. I've been looking for movies that portray those, but there's so very few, and certainly haven't seen that in any video games. And if anyone knows any, please point them out in the Discord or in our forums, because I'd love to check them out if they are in games. So different types of vampires, no. Good vampire games, absolutely. There's a bunch of them that are pretty cool. So.
Right. Warlord Kev on Discord is curious about avoiding overpowered spells in Dead House. So how are you going to manage balancing things? So specifically concerned about something like Repel in Blood Omen, which is kind of overpowered once you get it, at least in its version in the final form of the game.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think the way we do that is working with the community, and if something is overpowered like that, people will certainly let us know. Dude, now you're doing worse. What happened? You're regressing. So through working with the community and getting the game out there as soon as possible in early states are ways that we can fix this, and we want everything balanced. We don't want there to be anything particularly OP, and we want it to be a good experience for everyone and for it to feel fair. that you earn your victories and that you do things through skill, not through just luck or through something OP. Come on, buddy, you can do it.
I can do
You
it.
can beat Nuppy. Nupraptor, I knew him well. Well, not really. I don't know if you know that quote.
Not yet.
I imagine the game being online will help out with that. You can revise it. Blood Omen, you had to fix. It's released and it's out there. And I know with Repel in particular, that was a fairly late modification where it was originally a couple of different spells that were not quite as powerful individually.
Correct.
And yeah.
Yeah, that's 100% right. That's another reason why online free-to-play is superior, because it's a living, breathing environment where we continually are able to update it through feedback from the community. This old type of game model where you release a game, you work on it for like 3 or 4 years. In the case of Blood Omen, it was 5 or 6 years, and then you release it. It's gone. You can patch it, but it's really hard to do so. Whereas if we have the servers up and running all the time, and we're always changing the world and always balancing it, it's a much better experience for gamers that way. It might be rough at the start, and if the first stage is a bit rough, I want to apologize now and ahead of time, because there's going to be bugs and there's going to be problems. But by time we get around to really rolling it out, it'll be better for everyone's experience all around.
If it is death you seek, I will not
Absolutely.
deny you.
Mornblade on Discord has a personal question for Dennis. They start out by saying Erickson and Legati are great. They're curious what you think of Stephen King's work, in particular his Midworld.
Love it. I think it's awesome. I'm a huge Stephen King fan as well. I think my biggest criticism of King is his endings, of course, which is pretty common, but I think his character development is second to none. He's just a fantastic writer. I really love Stephen King's work.
You talked a little bit about this in the last stream, but Smoke Bermandan on Twitch is asking, can you change classes as you play, or do you have to start over? Can you start out as a mage and then train to become a tank while losing the magic?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that comes down to what kind of game design fundamentally do we want to have, and in the end, it's really, do you want to go for something that's asymmetrical or something's totally symmetrical? So if you look at Path of Exile, it's got a fantastic design where essentially your class defines where you start off in their graphical skill tree, but that's still a very symmetrical game. We want to do an asymmetrical design, so we want to have different trees for different classes, and we want them to play very differently. However, so the answer is once a vampire, always a vampire, but we want to make it so you can create multiple classes and you can play multiple classes. So you just have to build them up again. And I don't see much difference in the experience of the player, except they don't get to go to level 50 right away and respec. That's currently the path we're on. If people think that's a huge negative, let us know, but I really like the idea of asymmetry and having classes that are truly different, not just different positions within a graph. Not to say that that's bad. I think it's really good. I love Path of Exile, and I think Wolkin's going down that way too, Wilson.
Yep.
And they have a rotating graph that looks really cool, but I think we're going to stick with classes.
Makes sense. Will choosing skills or other sort of subclass decisions in character building cause cosmetic changes? So, for example, if the vampire develops the werebat tree, will they start looking more like a vampire when they're in their human form? That's from Keel Blowlife on Twitch.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and things I've thought about quite a bit. Do your decisions that you make in your skill tree affect your physical appearance? We would like to go in that direction. I think that's a very cool direction. So do you get more of a pharaoh-looking vampire, or if you use magic, do you get something that's, there's your mace, do you get something that's more of an aristocrat? See, now you can find that statue.
And it can smash those rocks.
And then
So I have to go back to that town.
It's something we would like to do. and it's on the queue, but it's pretty far back. But given enough time with these online free-to-play games, we should be able to get that in eventually. It won't be right away though. So.
Iron sword. Spiked mace.
All right. James Carmichael on Twitch was curious about something, and I'm going to work in a Mama Robot question here too. So, if you were given the chance to direct a live-action version of Blood Omen: Legacy of Kain, who would you cast? And in particular, Mama Robotnik was curious what Janos Adran would look like in your version of the story.
Oh God. Well, geez, I haven't never even thought about that. That's a great question, and I have to say that I don't know if anyone's seen The Witcher, but I think where they've taken The Witcher, there are some questionable casting, but the main character for The Witcher, I think the casting was fantastic. I'm blanking on his name right now, but it basically he's really good. I think a lot of I'm a big Michael Moorcock fan as well. That was my first sort of step into dark fantasy, and for those who may or may not know Michael Moorcock, he's got like multiple universes, multiple different heroes, the Eternal Champion concepts. I guess that kind of look is where I would take things. Where I would take Janos Aldrin, oh geez, I don't know. The vampires and where they took them in the Legacy of Kain series, I'm more of systematic in the way that I do things, so there would be certain reasons why different deformations would be present in different vampires, and I think they just took things in a certain art direction that after a certain amount of time vampires started to look a certain way, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just not how I would have done it. I would have gone really more towards a systematic system of, are they more visceral, are they more magical, or more more of an aristocrat? All of these different things would have affected these particular things, and that's probably, so thinking about Janos Aldrin, I think about his history, what kind of vampire was he, that's how I'd start to cast him. And at that point I have no idea. So now we're, I would have to think about that for a long time. It's a great question though, I love it. So.
Excellent. We had a question earlier, and unfortunately I don't have the name of the person that asked this, but they were curious in particular. So in the introduction of Blood Omen: Legacy of Kain, which we saw on the last stream, do you know where Ariel's murder took place? And they're curious in particular what happened to her body after that, in between then and her appearance at the Pillars.
I've never heard that question before ever, actually. It's so interesting that people and gamers would be interested in that kind of thing. So that was a temple of balance, and she was essentially at the temple. But that was the only scene in the entire game where we show that, and we didn't show it with much. It was a sort of a low-budget shot where we had a wall and we had like her putting stuff in the balance. So that was sort of at the Temple of Balance, is the way I would describe it. And she was so messed up that the body, as you can see, half of her face was torn off. We really didn't think about where we would put the body, quite frankly. So you're getting lots of magic, buddy. You need blood.
I know.
But now you can stun people, right? Yes. Oh, this is where the
statue was.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Oh, you get some blood here too.
Yes.
So, no answer on where the body was. Not contemplated. But that's essentially where she was at her home abode, where you see nup raptors and all of those different places. We never explored that because Kain himself ended up being the balance pillar.
Inrazero on Twitch is curious, in your version of the Blood Omen Legacy of Kain universe, what powers and abilities would the Balance Guardian have had?
Well, in a sense, Kain was that. So he uses essentially what's blood magic. So everything has a plus and a minus to its limits. So it would be very much a hybrid of, and really I'm just answering this for the first time because no one's asked me this question before either, but it would very much be along the lines of, you would have to trade one thing for another. There would always be balance, sort of a yin and yang kind of philosophy within the entire power system. So if you're going to do something extreme on one end, something extreme on another end would happen. And these are the sort of cause and effect principles that would be associated with it. Obviously that was never really explored beyond the point that the definition of a vampire is exactly that, where you need blood to survive, and at the same time, you have to be mindful of what you're doing, and that you're really essentially the balance pillar as you're going through and righting all these wrongs for this extreme wrong that was done at the beginning, which was really a catalyst to set everything in motion to decide whether Kain would, ultimately damn the world or sacrifice himself. Now, the interesting thing, look at that. I was wondering if you're going to do that. The interesting thing is, you can't smash those. I don't think. Anyway.
Okay.
It's a different type of puzzle. You want to, you need misform,
Oh.
so you can walk over the water.
Okay.
I think that's what I remember. Everyone sort of thought the choice where you sacrificed yourself was a sort of very negative choice. I envision that as just an alternate choice, where the story didn't have to end for Kain there, because he is already dead. And if you look and you explore where we're going with Dead House Sonata, death in Dead House Sonata is just a matter of changing states, whether you're in an ethereal state, whether you're in a physical state, or you're in a contained state. That's the directions I would have started to think to take it. I didn't. It was just interesting for me how people took that of, oh, that's the one that Kain never would have taken. Well, that actually was a possible solution. It would have had different ramifications for the overall story as well. Yeah, see, this is what you want misform for, so you can travel all along, so you can walk on water. Yeah.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I hope that's a good answer for that.
Yeah, I think so. Continuing along those same general lines, I think this is at least hinted at in Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, but were the Guardians originally, how were they chosen? Was it from birth, or did they have to do something to earn that position? And this is from Smoke Vermont on Twitch.
Yeah, that's a good question. They were chosen because of who they were and what they represented as a person, just as Kain was kind of chosen, to right the balance. That's the way I would describe who chose them. Were they chosen from birth? We never really explored that particular aspect of it. It was more the pillars themselves and what they represented. Obviously, extreme long life, other various things came along with, being a guardian of the pillar, and it was very much sought after and sacred position. All these kind of things were sort of the built-in automatic mythos. And back then too, I was reading some Wheel of Time as well. That was when Wheel of Time first started coming. I'm really glad that series got finished. I have to go back and visit it now that it's finally done. I got to like the 7th book or 6th book or something.
Wow.
So those kind of things were inspirational for me, and I just sort of, when we were writing the story, maybe took that as maybe as a given, and maybe should have explained it more. But it was more because of what the person was, rather than what they had to do to get there. Did their particular essence represent that pillar, and then getting it not being put into that position that changed over time, obviously, like even with Malik. And that was just part of the history and the way things were going. Look at you, you're finding all these secrets now. Hopefully that's a good answer, Ben.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just reading over this next one here. Kain Masterlock on Twitch is curious. In Legacy of Kain Defiance, Mortinius is shown making Kain using the Heart of Darkness, which sort of becomes a singular artifact in that game, versus the multi-use version in the first game. Is that in line with how you imagined Kain being made by Mortinius, or did you have something else in mind, or non-specific?
Yeah, that's all them and not me. That's not where I would have taken it or anything like that. I think it's really cool what they did with that, but that's very different than anything I had planned.
Some of the item dialogue, I think it's for Kain's Iron Sword in this game, mentions the Cerioli swordsmiths. Is there backstory there that didn't end up in the game?
So yeah, there's certainly some world building. So for the great sword makers, and kind of really along the lines of Damascus, and you'll see a lot of historical references that are in the game too. And I remember it's pretty funny because some of them are even in Game of Thrones, like the Colossus of Rhodes. We have some homages in Kain when you're doing the different time travels, you're seeing it being built. And then it's torn down. Those are the kind of things we put in. So they were kind of like the great swords makers. You had some of those in both Japan and the famous Damascus steel and Toledo swords. All those kind of things is where that was coming from. So yeah, we just definitely had some stuff developed, but it was never meant to be put in the game. It was sort of backstory. That we never explored. Probably would have explored in the sequel, but never got around to it, obviously.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Reina Adron on Twitch is asking a question that I've seen asked before, and I don't know that I've ever seen an answer to this. So in the intro to Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, we see Malik being his spirit being infused into his armor, and his skeleton is left behind. Later in the game, where Ian is going to be shortly, you'll see Malik's corpse in his bastion, but then when he gets to Avernus, you'll see another chain skeleton in that same place where Malik was fused to his armor. Is that a continuity error, or is that someone else who was subjected to the same fate, or what was going on there?
Yeah, not a continuity error. That was done like that on purpose, and that was more stories and different things. I believe one of them was done to provide a hint for the sacrifices. When you possess people and they get chained up. I think that was one of the reasons we put one of those in. But yeah, it was a character for a different storyline and things that we never fully explored in the game. So it wasn't a continuity error. That was there. We knew there was two of them, and that was done on purpose.
Makes sense. Is there a particular architecture that has inspired you most when you're designing current and previous games? Some of it is seems to be Greek and Roman and so forth, but some of it's very elaborate and unusual.
A lot of times that's got to do with conversations of where the story's going and visions we want with the art director. Obviously with Kain, we had some Gothic things in mind, but we started layering on different colors and different things. So this has got a very German aspect to it, even with Dead House, obviously with the spelling, the German spelling of house. We're going to have some Germanic leanings and some Eastern European leanings. I think that's some of the directions we'll go now. But yeah, it's really where the story is going to take it, I think. And obviously right now with the town, we're very medieval. And sort of Dark Age, Western Europe, and Eastern Europe. That's where we're going to be taking Dead House. But inspiration comes from anywhere. Like for Two Human, everything was based off of boats and Norse design of boats. So each different game has its own sort of thing we try to go for it. That's the only way I can answer that. So, Blood Omen didn't have, I would say, as much of a coherent art direction as we started coming to later, but I thought that made the game pretty cool. So,
Absolutely. You reminded me of a question I had actually, which is Two Human had some really fantastic architecture, and I may have missed something, just some sort of common source, but when I saw the first of Marvel's Thor movies, I thought, wow, someone played Two Human. Is that your take on that too, or is there some common source that maybe inspired both?
well, certainly there's a common source, and that is, the Norse architecture. Everything they did was based off boats. But I've had that people say that so many times too. Someone definitely played Two Human, who made some of those movies. I thought so too. I think it's kind of cool to see that kind of stuff. But yeah, I would say there's definitely a common source, and we all stand on the shoulders of giants. So
Makes sense. Kale Blowlife on Twitch is curious if you ever had plans to develop the story of Kain's life before he was assassinated at the beginning of Blood Omen: Legacy of Kain.
yeah, for sure. And I think that stuff is always very interesting. And one of the things that we have planned for Dead House, as an example, is when you come into, if you read parts of the Necro Libriatus, there's like a summoning. It just basically illustrates when you first come into the world, you don't have a lot of memories of your former life. And some of those origin stories we want to explore for gamers so they can expand upon that too and find out what they were like in their previous lives and what got them to where they want to be. And Dead House Sonata is a very dark world, and so dark that in many cases people would rather be dead than alive. And we want to explore that too. What is making the world the way it is? There's so many different themes that we want to explore in Dead House, and it's very ambitious. I'm very excited about it, and I'm really looking forward to see what the feedback is as we start rolling this stuff out. So,
Oh, excellent. Reina Audron on Twitch is curious about whether there was any development of the story of Kain's brother in Blood Omen: Legacy of Kain.
Kain has a brother.
yeah, no, I don't even. When was the brother mentioned? Is that later on? Is that in another story?
That's a really good question. I think it must be in the game. She really knows this series, but I'm having a hard time placing that.
Well, yeah. So I don't remember it in Blood Omen. So it is possible. I guess we mentioned it, but I'm wondering if that's in a later game that we didn't write, and that's something Crystal added. I would love to see the reference and either be reminded or say, yeah, not us, one or the other. But yeah, nothing comes to mind right now. But it's a great question. Makes me feel I have to, go back and read everything. So.
Well, we've been notified that the stream has been going on for a couple hours.
Has it been a couple hours?
It's been a couple hours.
Oh, it only seems like a half an hour. Ben, did you have fun? It was so great to have you
absolutely.
on.
Yes, thank you so much
It's-
for. Sorry, continue, Ben.
Oh, I was just going to thank you both. It's been an honor.
Oh man, we're so happy that you joined us. We think the stuff that you've been doing in Lost Worlds is pretty fantastic, and I really the things like yourself and others in the Blood Omen community that have kept it alive has really, has been a big inspiration for Dead House from the standpoint of this is why we want to create community tools. And imagine it's almost like an H.P. Lovecraft approach as well. If we create something where everyone can contribute, it will live on long after we're on the project, potentially hundreds of years from now, when we're all passed away and others can continue to contribute to it. That's really what we're hoping to do. And your explanation and even the question about Kain's brother has got me interested now. I'm like, wow. So we would be nowhere without you guys. And, Ben, we work for gamers. We work for you guys.
Yep.
And it's an honor for us to have you on the stream. And we'll hope you'll join us again sometime.
I'd love to.
Cool.
And thank you everyone who's watching us on the stream and everyone who's watching us afterwards on YouTube. Be sure to check out our website, deadhousenada.com, and join our Discord. I'm sure Scott will drop a link in the chat shortly, and he'll also drop a link to the website. Check us out. Join our forums where you can help contribute to the design of Dead House Sonata.
You played much better. Hopefully the stream was smoother. It's our second stream. And we had Ben on, which made life super easy. And
Yes,
it
we
was
love
just
having
fun
you on,
just
Ben.
answering questions. So thanks, everyone. And thanks again, Ben. It was awesome to have you on.
Thanks for joining,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.